weekend. Mostly sunny for us this afternoon. East wind 5 to 10, 71. Partly cloudy, 46 tonight. Partly sunny, 71 tomorrow. Sunday, sunny, high of 65. Staff meteorologist John Weatherby, Money Radio 1510 and 99.3 FM.
It's now 67 degrees, and the Dow is up 192 points at 16,077. S&P 500 up 35 at 1905. And the NASDAQ up 106 at 4578. Reporting for Money Radio, I'm Ken Morgan.
The views expressed on the following program do not necessarily reflect the views of Money Radio staff, management, or advertisers, and do not represent an offer to buy or sell any securities. Some interviews heard on this program may be sponsored by the participants. It's time for Health Futures with Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth. This is Arizona's only show dedicated to providing you with expert advice on how to live a longer, healthier, and happier life. To learn more, call 602-264-8009. That's 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Bob Roth.
Good afternoon. My name is Bob Roth, and you are listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. We're a weekly show found right here on Money Radio 1510 AM, 99.3 FM, and on the World Wide Web at moneyradio1510.com. And if you're just tuning in for the very first time, our show is called Health Futures for a reason. Because first of all, we're talking about healthcare and health for our future. But I also want to bring up the point that our tagline is taking stock in you and who you are, and really having the ability to be in control of your healthcare. And I think that's really the premise behind where we're at with the Affordable Care Act and these organizations that have been created, and we call them ACOs, they're Accountable Care Organizations, to try to help members of our community navigate through the journey in healthcare. And with that, I really believe that we are shifting our paradigm. And many people in the medical profession, and I've had many people here on our show, who are caring for, the people they're caring for are patients. And that paradigm shift is more shifting to consumers. Again, health futures and being in control of your health care, determining what you are going to do to have good outcomes is really more consumer related. So, we're seeing the changes right now. I've had many people here on our show that are far more intelligent than I am in healthcare, and they're forced to embrace these changes, but the changes are rampant, they're happening, and the healthcare that we're seeing being delivered today is very different from what we had yesterday, and it will be very different from what we will have tomorrow. With that, also Cypress Home Care Solutions is the company that my family owns and I operate. We've been in business now for 22 years, and we serve the Maricopa County region, enabling our aging adult population to be able to stay at home. Now, staying at home is something that I know many people want to do. Not everybody can do. But if you can, home care agencies, especially employer-based home care agencies like Cypress Home Care Solutions, can help you do so. So our show, Health Futures, is about bringing meaningful content to our listening audience, and we do that by bringing incredible guests. And today is no different from any of the other days that I have hosted shows here at Money Radio Studios. Today I have a great guest on who is in the elder law profession, and she's been doing this for 9 plus years, and has a wealth of experience in her 9 long years in the business. I want to introduce to our listening audience Emily Taylor. Welcome to the show, Emily.
Thank you, Bob. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're here, and I will tell you, I have the carbon copy here in my studio, and I had the original in here back in June of last year. Actually, it was May 29th of last year. I had Jennifer Collins-Taylor. And there's a relationship between Emily and Jennifer Collins-Taylor, correct?
There is. She's my mother.
She's your mom.
She is. I'm blessed to have her.
And she's an amazing woman, and she is working in the hospice field and has worked in other related fields, and is the author of an incredible book called Living Life, Dying Death, and really talking about something that many people don't really want to talk about.
Right.
But we need to have that conversation, and we've had that conversation here on our radio show, not only with your mom, but others in our community, talking about having the conversation about death and dying.
Right. So her book focuses on death and dying, and a lot of people come to see me to talk about death and dying, but I also want to make sure we share some of the focus on potentially becoming incapacitated. So a lot of the conversations I have when somebody comes to see me as a consultation is talking about not only what happens to your stuff when you pass away, because that matters to a lot of people, but also in the meantime, if something should happen and you can't make decisions about your health care or your finances, who are those people going to be, and what kind of decisions do you want?
And, you know, we talk about this a lot on the show, and that is having a plan. Mm-hmm. You know, the old adage that if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail is so true. And, I mean, we need to sit down, and I say we, the adult children need to sit down, because I know that our listening audience is consisting of people that are 35 years and older. We need to sit down with our parents if they've not planned to say, hey, you know what? We need to start talking about what if something were to happen. I like to refer to it as the proverbial bus. If we are going to get hit by that bus, what do we do?
Right. Well, and you need to have that conversation yourselves. That's the other important thing, is making sure that both children and parents are having these conversations, because really anybody over the age of 18, if you haven't made a plan, unfortunately, the courts or the government and the law has a backup plan, and so sometimes that may not be what you want. So if you have an opportunity to make your wishes known, I always recommend people of any age sit down and try to formalize that. Formalize
it, memorialize it, and it's interesting you brought up the 18 years old. And, you know, I have children, and my youngest is 18, and I got some advice from an elder law attorney saying that, you know, you really need to have at least a medical power of attorney in place, because the bus I talked about, or the car accident that could potentially happen, you as a parent, if your daughter or son is living in another area that you can't get to and you can't communicate to, or even if they are living here, you have no rights.
That's correct. Your rights are pretty limited. Of course, you know, some doctors will talk to you, but when it comes to major life decisions about what happens to your future health care, where you might be living, who's going to be managing your finances or your right to income, if your wishes aren't known, if you haven't done a power of attorney, if you haven't done any directives, then they're going to have to turn to the court to apply for guardianship or conservatorship. And so to the extent that can happen on day one after your 18th birthday, that's a point at which all people need to think about those wishes and do something.
Need to do something. And for our listening audience, if you have adult children that are 18 or older and you've not done something, you need to do something just in case. And God forbid it would happen a million times over. But, you know, we have our plan. And I had a very good friend of mine say that man has his plan and then God has his. And, you know, we just don't know what tomorrow is going to bring.
That's absolutely correct.
So, Emily, you're a sole practitioner.
I am.
You've been in the elder law business for 9 years, and your specialty, if you would, is elder law, special needs, and estate planning. And that's what you do.
That's correct.
and it's not that simple. I made it sound simple because each one of them comes with a lot of details and a lot of planning, a lot of organizing, and a lot of moving parts.
That's true. Essentially, what I like to do is be able to look at any individual's life circumstances, whether or not they're at a time of crisis, like something unfortunately has gone wrong and we're dealing with a situation where we need to do some immediate planning, but also at any other stage during their life, looking towards the future, unfortunately pointing out some realities that may or may not come true, but that we need to plan for. And then also specializing in folks who may have some special needs, some special considerations if they have a diagnosis or a disease that may limit their ability to make those decisions in the future.
And I know also this about you, if folks have children that have special needs too, setting up special needs trusts and stuff like that is something that you do. You know what, we're coming up on a break, and I think this is such an important topic, and here we are still at the beginning of this year. We need to have this conversation. We need to talk about planning. We need to talk about putting our affairs in order and memorializing them. So with that, we're up against a break. You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. I've got Emily Taylor. She's an elder law, special needs, and estate planning attorney in the house. We will be right back.
What if I told you there's a firm that will create a customized portfolio and financial plan for you and offer a 100% satisfaction guarantee? Think it doesn't exist? Think again.
Hi, I'm Mo Ansari, president of Compact Asset Management. When you start a new relationship with Compact, we'll create your customized investment portfolio and financial plan dedicated to help you reach your goals. Try us out for a year. If you're not happy for any reason, you'll get all of the management and maintenance fee that you paid refunded. This is our 100% satisfaction guarantee.
Call Compact Asset Management at 800-388-9700 to find out more. That's 800-388-9700. Satisfaction guarantee doesn't apply to fees and commissions charged by third parties for such things as insurance products or mutual fund redemptions. It also doesn't apply to any market losses which might occur in an account. For additional information regarding this guarantee, please see the disclosure brochure available at the time you enroll or upon request.
Compact Asset Management is a registered investment advisor. Funds custodian, Fidelity Institutional Wealth Services, member FINRA SIPC.
I'm sure you've heard invest in Costa Rica. In retirement, you can live life you deserve in Costa Rica. In fact, CNBC recently called Costa Rica the hottest real estate market in the world. This is your chance to learn from renowned Costa Rica investment expert and CEO of the Costa Rica team, Charles Boyd, about investing in Costa Rica January 30th in Scottsdale. An exciting investment opportunity offering 20 to 25% average annual returns plus income for life. Invest safely and securely in Costa Rica real estate. Even learn how to use your self-directed IRA to invest abroad. If you're interested in beautiful beachfront living in a warm tropical climate with a lower cost of living while earning higher returns on your investment dollar, learn about investing in Costa Rica. Don't miss the opportunity to learn more from a top Costa Rica investment expert. Register today for free at CostaRicaSeminars.com. That's Costa Rica Seminars with an S.com.
Come to Costa Rica.
At Interstate Batteries, you'll find some of the longest-lasting automotive batteries in the business. You can find the Interstate Batteries dealer nearest you by visiting interstatebatteries.com today.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. My name is Bob Roth, and you are listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. We're on our second segment, and I have got Emily Taylor. She's a elder law, special needs, and estate planning attorney right here in Scottsdale, Arizona. She comes to us with 9 years of experience. She's off practicing on her own, and you know what? Like all my guests, Emily is no different. She's got a great story as to why she is in this profession. And, you know, I think as consumers, and as I was talking about on the first segment, you know, healthcare is really moving from being, you know, patient-centered to really being more consumer-centered. As consumers, we want to be able to engage people to help us and assist us that have the same passion that we do. And Emily, you got into this business because of an event that happened in your life. Mm-hmm. So what I'd like you to do is if you could walk through with our listening audience, you know, about your background, where you're from, and what really propelled you to get into practicing elder estate planning and special needs law.
No problem. I actually am an Army brat. I was born in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and so we moved around to a couple different Army bases while I was young, but we settled ultimately in Galena, Illinois. So Galena is a small town in the Northwest, and we did that because it happened to be in between my two grandparents. So I had grandparents living in Freeport, Illinois, and then also grandparents in Jefferson, Iowa, or Carroll, Iowa, so about halfway in between, and we did that because my parents thought it was important for us to be close to our grandparents. I was raised in a family where my father is a physical therapist, and so we were involved in the family business and from a young age in hospital-type settings, rehab care facilities. I do remember going on home health visits with him, and this was a little bit different because it was a small town and health laws were a little bit different. But also, as you had mentioned, my mom has always been interested in death and dying and also a part of hospice. Ultimately, I went to the University of Arizona for law school. In the summer after my first year of law school, I visited my grandparents in Freeport, Illinois, and my grandma told me, "Oh, since you're here, let's go meet our elder law attorney. She looks just like you." And so I said, "Sure, Grandma, that's fine." And, I'd had a year of law school, so I was familiar with the big ones, criminal and corporate, and had some thoughts about what I might want to pursue. But ultimately, what I learned during that visit really changed the course of my career. At the time, my grandfather had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. He'd had it for quite some time, but fortunately it was slow moving. And during this particular summer, he had started to fall quite a bit. And so they were in a situation where they were having to call the fire department, and it just wasn't working anymore. And at that point, they knew that in the future, if not immediately, they were going to be looking at long-term care, which, as you know, and as our listeners know, can be very, very expensive. And so they went to see an elder law attorney, not only to talk about financial power of attorney and healthcare power of attorney in that decision-making capacity, but also whether or not there was anything they could do to make sure that while my grandpa was ready to go into long-term care, my grandma was not. She was very, very healthy and independent. And so they wanted to make sure that the resources they had after, a lifetime of being a teacher's assistant and an accountant, they had saved to see if they could preserve any of that. And so they had done some planning with their elder law attorney. And the federal law allows for certain provisions to be made for the spouse that stays at home and the spouse who's in the community. And so they went through that process. And so I was exposed to this concept that there is a portion of the population who has worked very hard and has saved a lot of money, and unfortunately the costs of healthcare and the costs of long-term care can essentially put both of them on the streets after a period of time. And so ultimately I saw my grandpa ended up living in a skilled nursing for close to 8 years before he passed away. My grandma's still alive and independent and living in her own home, and she's actually here in Arizona this weekend. So it worked out wonderfully for them. And so getting exposure to that concept and knowing that was available led me to exploring this practice area and ultimately turning it into my career.
Graduated U of A law.
I did.
I have children that all went to U of A or going to U of A.
For the Sun Devil fans, I did also graduate from Arizona State for my undergrad.
There you go. You got them both covered.
I did.
And I will say this, there's something to be said when you've experienced this personally. And while, it didn't affect you personally, but it affected your family, the people you love. And it was so nice when you sit here and you talk about how your grandma invited you in and said, hey, we're going to go visit an elder law attorney. Yeah. And how that really shaped your direction and propelled you to do what you're doing. And, there are so many people that are in the aging adult world that, it's really important to find where their motivation's at. And I'm not here to discount anybody that's in it that doesn't have a personal story, but those that do have personal stories really understand and maybe can more appreciate the person that's on the other side of the desk from them and what they're going through. And I would imagine that, there are often times when you're sitting with clients where you can't help but think about your own grandpa and you can't think about your grandma and how they were very fortunate to have this plan. And, it's interesting because you and I talked about this, and that is, we talked about it the first segment, talked about planning and that old adage that if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. But there's so much to be said about advanced planning versus crisis planning, and if you could walk us through that.
Sure. I'd be happy to. As you mentioned, people who come to see me, they generally fall into one of the two categories. And it is interesting to learn. A younger couple might come into my office and say, we have young children. We really need to get together some documents. And we think we need to do a will. And there's something out there that we think we need to do for health directives. But we're so late. We totally forgot to do this or haven't gotten there. And I have to remind them that a large percentage of everybody hasn't gotten to this point where they're ready to come in and sit down and talk about these things. And so what I like to do during the consultation is really listen to what their family is like, what's going on in their lives, what concerns and goals they might have, and then really explain to them what different documents do during the different stages of your life. Because at any age, there's planning that we've talked about, but certain things become more important as we age. And so with a younger family, we're going to talk about healthcare directives, advanced directives, which include a healthcare power of attorney, a mental health power of attorney, a living will, and a few other items. And then we're also going to talk about finances because that is important. And so we talk about financial power of attorney, which ultimately gives an agent the ability to act upon your incapacity, or in some cases effective immediately. But giving that power to somebody who you really trust and who has hopefully some background or information from you ahead of time, so they're not stepping into a situation completely unaware of how you've been living your life, what your financial goals are. And then we also, of course, touch on what happens should you pass away. And so that conversation, people tend to see me because they want to lead with that part of the conversation, and I try to back up and say, let's talk about right now, and in the event something happens before you pass away. Because for me, that I see a lot of crisis coming up in that case, and so I really wanted to change that focus.
I want to talk about some of the crises that you run into, and probably in the next segment, because I think for our listening audience, it really helps that if you can share maybe some stories, and I know that, we'll maybe change the names to protect the innocent, but at least people can relate to it because these crises may happen to them. But my question to you about advanced planning is frequency in reviewing documents. What is your advice? Because I can sit down with you today. Do you want me to come back every year? 5 years? Are we waiting for an event to happen? Children to leave for college, or children to get married. I mean, what is your recommendation? Because I truly believe people need to have that in mind. And the other thing is that Arizona is made up of people from all over the country, or the world, if you would, come here, and this is their destination. But the fact of the matter is that we have very few natives that live here and people that have come here. We'll use Minnesota, for example. So if somebody's moved here from Minnesota and they come in to see you, or if they don't come in to see you and they think they have their affairs in order, but they have those affairs in order based on Minnesota laws and not Arizona laws, correct?
That's correct. We're going to sit down and look at them. They are presumed to be valid, but obviously there are life changes. And to go to your first question, when do we need to look at these? Ultimately, we need to look anytime your life changes. So you mentioned kids leaving for college. Mostly I'm looking at changes in the family structure, new kids, aging kids. If there's any type of disability or concern about impending disease or diagnosis, divorce obviously changes everything quite a bit. And then with out-of-state folks, technology has changed a lot. So if you have agents, perhaps you've nominated a child who lives in another state, then that person is able to be involved in the circumstances. So we can talk a little bit more about that.
We'll talk about it at the break. We're up against a break. You're listening to Health Futures. I've got Emily Taylor in the house. We will be right back.
As we reach the bottom of the hour, we pause for a look at the world's news. Then we're back with Money Talk. We're Money Radio 1510 and 99.3 FM.
It is now snowing in Washington as the East Coast prepares for a record-breaking blizzard. D.C. Police Chief Kathy Lanier says residents are being asked to stay home.
What the mayor has said is that, this is a serious and dangerous storm, and that we would like to have everybody remain in their homes so they can stay safe. She's not given a declaration or ordered people, but we are taking this very seriously.
Some areas could get up to 30 inches of snow. According to tracking firm FlightAware, 2,900 flights have been canceled today and more than 1,500 are delayed. Existing home sales are regaining strength. Danielle Hell of the National Association of Realtors.
The 14.7% increase that we saw in December is the highest that we've ever recorded. And this is because we saw a big drop-off in November and we saw a strong bounce back.
Wall Street is shrugging off the snow. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up 183 points, the Nasdaq gaining 106, the S&P 500 up 35. I'm Ann Cates.
I just feel like something's missing.
I know. What we had was so big.
And warm and bright.
And yellow.
Oh, I really miss the sun.
No sun? No problem. Centrum, the most trusted multivitamins, now have more of the vitamin D3 you need. Get the vitamin D you could be missing this winter with Centrum multivitamins. Now our highest level of D3 ever.
This Valentine's Day, give the gift that costs less than roses and lasts forever. Name a star after someone you love. I'm Rocky Moselle with International Star Registry. Call 800-282-3333 or visit starregistry.com and tell that special someone how much you care. For $54, we will send a beautiful personalized gift, and the new star name will be recorded in book form in the U.S. Copyright Office. Make it a Valentine's Day you will treasure forever. Call 800-282-3333 or visit starregistry.com and give the gift of a star.
This is Money Radio, where we mean business, and we talk about it every day to keep you up to date, because it could affect your bottom line.
Retirement isn't about what age you retire at, but at what income. Learn how to build, grow, and protect your retirement nest egg while locking in more income for life for both you and your spouse. How? By developing a profitable habit in 2016. Listening daily to one of the best retirement shows on the radio, Mastering Money, with retirement strategist Steve Jurich and the doctor, Sinclair No. Every weekday morning at 8 to 9, right here on Money Radio. See you there.
Need money for your business or real estate investment? Get $20,000 to $200,000 fast. Based on your credit score of 680 or more, it is 100% unsecured. And there are no upfront fees. Call 888-338-9947 now. That's 888-338-9947. Or go to getmefunds.com. Approvals within 48 hours. Call 888-338-9947 right now. That's 888-338-9947. Or go to getmefunds.com.
Laura Bramnick is a real estate agent and a real estate attorney. Laura Bramnick knows that a good attorney safeguards her clients and their well-being. Each decision or direction she and her clients make together is with one purpose, the most effective resolution, for now and for the future. For more information, visit talkrealestateaz.com or call 480-624-2705, 480-624-2705. To talk with Laura, call 480-624-2705.
On the right side of the trade, we correctly identified several of the market turning points over the last few years. We predicted that oil and gold prices were likely to remain low, and that world growth and company earnings were likely to deteriorate, and we were right on all counts. We now believe the stock market could be in for a significant drop in 2016. Learn to both protect yourself and profit, even when the market falls. Check out Online Trading Academy's The Right Side of the Trade, Thursdays and Saturdays at noon on Money Radio 1510 and 99.3.
Did you know Interstate Batteries is the nation's #1 battery recycler of automotive batteries? You can learn more at interstatebatteries.com. Visit an Interstate Batteries dealer near you today.
I'm Bruce Vail with Your Money Now. United Airlines is shutting down operations in the New York City, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Washington, D.C. areas through Saturday, ahead of a winter storm that is expected to drop as much as 2 feet of snow in some places. The airline is waiving change fees for customers ticketed to or from airports in the path of the storm. United said it hopes to resume operations Sunday. Google is in talks with several European countries to settle outstanding tax disputes and normalize relationships with them. France's economy minister said there is a positive dynamic in the discussions between Google and the countries, which include France and the UK. Shares of Google's parent company Alphabet are up more than 2.5% today. The broader market remains higher, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average up 217 points. The Nasdaq is up 116. The S&P 500 is ahead 38 points. That's your money now.
It's panic time. The boss just asked you when that new building will be completed, and you haven't even started yet. Well, don't panic. Call the name you know, General Steel. You've known General Steel for decades, and you know they'll save you about half the cost and about half the time of conventional construction. But did you know that General Steel has provided buildings for some of the biggest names in business and government? And did you know the General can provide pre-construction planning services for your total project? And I'll bet you didn't know you can get General Steel quality and save thousands. For example, a 40-foot by 60-foot building for under $22,000, or a 50 by 100 for under $35,000. That's right, 5,000 square feet for under $35,000, and all with General Steel's 50-year structural warranty. So don't panic. Call now and lock in some of the lowest prices this year. 866-95-STEEL. Call 866-95-STEEL today. Quick, the boss is coming. That's 866-957-8335.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. My name is Bob Roth, and you're listening to Health Futures, taking stock in you. We're up on our third segment. I've got Emily Taylor in the house. Emily is an estate planning, and she's a special needs and elder law attorney right here in Scottsdale, Arizona. And if you missed our first two segments, you can find them up on our website at cypresshomecare.com. We're in our third year of bringing great information to our listening audience on our aging adult population on how they can live a healthier, happier life. And really, Health Futures is centered around bringing incredible guests to talk about how to do just that. And Emily and I have been talking over the last two segments about planning and really making sure that you have a plan in place and making sure that, you are having the conversation. And I'm talking about our adult children listeners that are listening in right now, making sure that you're having that conversation with your mother, your father, your aunt, your uncle, your grandparents to make sure that they have memorialized what their wishes are. So we talked about in the last segment, Emily, we talked about advanced planning. And at the very, very end, we talked about crises. And, in your 9 short years of doing what you're doing, you've seen your fair share of crises. And every one of them, I'm sure, could have been avoided. But I would like our listening audience to really understand, what is involved if you don't have a plan in place and what that might look like.
Sure. Unfortunately, not everyone can be avoided, but a lot of them, a large majority of the plans crisis could have been avoided if there was a plan in place. And so, as a general statement, if you haven't made this decision, if you haven't used your own authority to decide while you have capacity who's going to be making your healthcare decisions and who's going to be managing your finances, the default is if something should occur and at that point it is too late and you can no longer make those decisions, then the court's going to have to supervise that, taking away your authority and giving that authority to somebody else. And so that process here in Arizona is guardianship and conservatorship. Guardianship in Arizona applies to decisions relating to the person. So where they're going to live, the doctors they're going to see, those types of things. And then in Arizona, conservatorship applies to financial decisions. And so, I see a lot of failures to plan and needing to pay for long-term care and to figure out family dynamics. But I see quite a few young professionals who have also not planned and unfortunately, what happens is, in one case, I had a young doctor who had a pretty massive stroke, and he was no longer able to make his decisions.
How young was he?
In his late 40s.
That's young.
That's young.
That's really young. Wow.
Yeah, and so he was married, and his spouse, obviously they had some joint accounts, but they hadn't done any formal planning. So there wasn't a power of attorney in place, there wasn't a trust in place, and so she had limited authority, but ultimately she didn't have the authority to manage the business. She didn't have the ability to make larger, significant healthcare decisions and long-term care decisions. And so she came to us understanding that we had to go to court to actually have her appointed as guardian conservator, because that is one of the common myths, that if you're married, your spouse can make these decisions for you. And that's just not true. So here we are, having to go to court to ask the court to give this permission to this spouse. And when you do that, a lot of things happen. Obviously, there's going to be some costs involving the court. You're going to most likely need or want to hire an attorney because it is pretty complicated. They are safeguarding the person's rights. So ultimately, we need to be very careful, and their job is to protect the person who can no longer make their decisions. They are also going to be appointed an attorney by the court. So there's at least 2 attorneys involved, sometimes more. And at that stage, you're basically putting on the court's record a lot of personal details. What's happened, medical diagnosis, what your financial situation looks like, what rights you need because you need to do one thing or another. So in this case, we're disclosing retirement accounts. We're disclosing what kind of insurance is in place. We're disclosing, in this case, we actually had to go in and try and later sell the business because there was a value to it. And while that is very, very complicated in and of itself, when you're adding the extra layer of the court having to approve that decision, the delay it takes to get anything approved with the court, it really complicated what is already a very stressful situation and turns it into a astronomically stressful situation. And so the court is meant, again, to protect the incapacitated person's interests, but that involves a lot of reporting to the court and a lot of things that if you're married and you absolutely trust your spouse and obviously you want them to help you in a circumstance like this, you need to make those wishes known, and you need to put them in writing through an estate plan, powers of attorney, trust.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get my hands around this. So a married couple, the husband is a practicing doctor.
Mm-hmm.
He's in his late 40s, has a stroke. They have not memorialized anything, way, shape, or form of what their plans are. So there was no medical power of attorney. There was nothing.
Correct. There was some business documents, but not in the sense that it allowed for the spouse to be able to make decisions about their personal finances and some other parts of the business. That authority was also not clearly laid out and not clear enough that allowed for her to proceed in any sense without court direction or supervision.
Wow. And I'm really trying to grasp the one point where you mentioned, so the spouse came to you, engaged your services. So you went to petition the court. And I get that the incapacitated doctor, the husband, has to have representation, but the court appoints an attorney for them?
They do. They do.
That's really, to me, it's like, can the spouse say, I want to get another attorney for them, or is it really the court's choice to pick someone from a list to represent them?
You do have an opportunity, if there is already an established relationship with an attorney, to request for that attorney to be appointed. But you need to be able to demonstrate that they had a relationship ahead of time. And in many, many cases, if we're at this point and we're going to court, that's not the case.
Do you ever find, and again, I mean, I've never been in this world, but do you ever find that there's some contention between you and this court-appointed attorney who doesn't know the husband but is representing his rights?
Well, and the other thing so the court-appointed attorney is representing their interests, and so there's a huge scale of whether or not that person can actually participate in the proceedings and let their wishes be known. So the other thing is a lot of times, maybe not in this case, but with brain injuries, there's a change in behaviors. With certain diseases, there are changes in how that person feels. And so while, for the first 20 years of their relationship, he absolutely trusted her and they would have done anything for each other. Because of this disease or because of this brain injury or anything else, it's changed the way that he may be acting. And so the court-appointed counsel's job is to represent that interest to the court. And so sometimes that means the addition of what's called a guardian ad litem, somebody to stand not in their shoes, but to look at the whole situation and act independently. And so that sometimes another person gets involved. And then we haven't even started talking about the kids who might all have their own opinions as well.
And the challenge I see, we're coming up on a break, but the challenge I see is if you didn't plan and you have this crisis, you have this event happen, is the sheer cost of this. This could cost tens of thousands of dollars that you weren't even planning on.
Easily.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we're up against a break, Emily, and I mean, I don't want to be sounding like the sky is falling, doom and gloom, but there's really a lot to having a plan.
And it's really easy.
It is really easy.
People are worried about it, but it's pretty easy to come sit down and talk with an attorney who knows what's going on and can come up with a plan for you. And ultimately, there is a cost, but the cost compared to the alternative is minimal.
I want to talk, when we come back from the break, the alternative, because everyone's using the Internet these days. And there's a thing called LegalZoom, and I'm not here promoting them. But really, I want to talk about having that face-to-face with a respected attorney like yourself versus using the Internet. Okay. We're up against a break. My name is Bob Roth. I've got Emily Taylor in the house. She's an elder law, special needs, and estate planning attorney. We'll be right back.
Today, investing feels scary. Hi, I'm Don McDonald from Talking Real Money. Stocks have been plummeting, bonds scare you, but do you really know what kind of risk you have in your portfolio? I bet you don't. While you must take risk to make money investing, anyone who claims otherwise is lying. You need to understand risk and know exactly how much risk lurks in your portfolio. Then, you need to learn how to build the right portfolio for your needs and risk tolerance. Most of what we save and invest is for our retirement, so our future lives literally depend on how we invest today. That's why I created a valuable real class, not a sales seminar, called Real Retirement, and I hope you'll attend my next one on January 23rd in Scottsdale. Tickets are on sale now at TalkingRealMoney.com. Learn all about risk and how to manage it by creating a portfolio based on Nobel Prize-winning research. Over 1,200 people paid to take my class in 2015, and now it's your turn. Reserve your seats today at TalkingRealMoney.com, TalkingRealMoney.com.
Learn how to get your estate in order Wednesday mornings at 9 on Estate Planning with attorney Matt Dana. With over 30 years of experience and expertise, Matt will share cutting-edge strategies, ideas, and tips on how to help secure your estate from life's unexpected events. Wondering how to protect and maximize your family's inheritance? Wonder no more. Listen to Estate Planning with attorney Matt Dana every Wednesday morning at 9, right here on Money Radio 1510 AM and 99.3 FM.
If you're listening to this message, then that's a good sign. In fact, we're always interested in good signs. Good signs that identify people and places. Good signs that communicate important information. With our business, we not only encourage good signs, we create them. We're Croy Sign Systems. Our signs identify, direct, and inform so you can navigate through life faster and easier. And that's a really good Croy sign. Call Croy Sign Systems today at 480-619-6070 or visit us online at kroysigns.com.
Did you know Interstate Batteries is the nation's #1 battery recycler of automotive batteries? You can learn more at interstatebatteries.com. Visit an Interstate Batteries dealer near you today.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth.
Back. My name is Bob Roth, and you are listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. We're on our 4th segment, Emily. It's hard to believe. And if you're listening in, I've got Emily Taylor. She's an elder law, special needs, and estate planning attorney right here in Scottsdale, Arizona. And if you missed the first 3 segments, you can catch them up on our website at cypresshomecare.com. So we got a chance to really talk about crisis planning and advanced planning. And, I came in at the very, very end and said, okay, let's talk about documents, because there's a lot of stuff up on the internet, and there's something called LegalZoom. I'd love for you to, share your experience with us, because I'm sure you've come across people that said, I got my documents, or that you've come across a situation where they've needed to engage you, and you are dealing with these inferior documents that weren't done correctly.
That is true. And ultimately, my goal is for anybody to sit down and do this planning. So I often tell people, friends, people I meet out in the public, if you're not going to come see me, at the very least, there are forms online, but I generally point to healthcare directives from the Arizona Attorney General. So those are actually available online, and I recommend, if you're not going to call me or come see me, at the very least go online, download your healthcare power of attorney, your mental health care power of attorney, and your living will, and get that done. That said, I do see a lot of documents. People will prepare their own documents through different legal form preparation. You can also, I have heard, purchase fabricated powers of attorney and things like that. When you're dealing with finances, my true belief is that it is important to sit down and talk to somebody who has an understanding of the different things that can come up, because a lot of times what I find is that the forms are the simple version, the story you hope happens. And so you provide that, of course, my son or my daughter is going to be the person making this decision, and they'll know what to do, and we'll just put their name in here, and then they're younger than me, so they'll be alive when I pass away. And unfortunately, what I see commonly is that life doesn't go as planned. Other things come up. And so part of our conversation when we sit down is talking about things that you might not expect. And they're not always fun conversations, but they're important to have. A lot of times it's important to think about, when you're going through something that's so stressful, and perhaps you're grieving, and there's a lot of other things going on, who is available to make those decisions, who's responsible to make those decisions, and then ultimately, what would you want to have happen if life hasn't gone as planned? And so a lot of times we're looking at contingencies, and a lot of that gets missed when you go online and fill out a form and it kicks out a document for you to hit print and sign. The other thing I see is that there are legal requirements for signing these documents and having them witnessed, and in some cases notarized, and that often can be incorrectly done. And so I see that a lot. And then lastly, people who do trusts online, one of the biggest things, one of the most important things with trusts is making sure they're properly funded, and making sure you understand what should go in your trust, what perhaps shouldn't. And a lot of times I will see somebody who has gone online, purchased a trust package, filled out the names, what they want to happen, but then their trust is empty. And that really does us very little good. And so those are the kind of things we're going to talk about in person. Those are the kind of things that if you retain me, we're going to make sure get done. And those are the kind of things that when you asked in our very first segment, how often are we looking at these? That's one of the things that we're going to keep coming back to. Were those decisions you made a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago still relevant? Have we kept our trust funded? Have we kept everything the way we thought? And what's happened in our lives that we weren't expecting?
Sure. No, absolutely. And the fact of the matter is, it's the old adage, and I've shared a couple of them in this segment today, or this show today, and that is, you can pay me now or you can pay me later.
You're going to pay me a lot more later.
Exactly. You're going to pay me a lot more later. And that's really what I'm sitting here listening to you say, is that, yeah, you can grab these things, but they may not conform to the laws. They may not be what you were intending. Mm-hmm. And it costs you a lot less to sit down with an estate planning attorney now versus dealing with them later. It's interesting. I've brought this up before with other guests. Oftentimes I would imagine, Emily, you get called by the adult child, and it's pertaining to the parent that they're caring about.
Many times.
And, the question is, who's the client? Is it the adult child who's called you, or is it the person that they're calling about? And in the legal profession, you guys have to really walk that line really, really carefully in terms of conflicts, because you don't want to ever put yourself in a conflicting role. But as I understand it, even though the adult child called you, you're representing their mom or dad or whoever they called you about, correct?
That is correct.
That is your client.
Absolutely. If I am taking action on their request, I do represent the children if they've been appointed as agents or if they've been given that capacity to do some long-term care planning. But when we're talking about estate planning, my client is the person who's directing me about their wishes, and I need to be worried about that, but also confidentiality. And so I really make an effort and do draw some lines. And if there's any gray areas, we're going to put it down in writing. We're going to make sure everybody understands and agrees ahead of time before we proceed. It's very important.
Oh, absolutely perfect. So we're in the home care business at Cypress Home Care Solutions, and we have the ability to care for our aging adult population that want to stay home and that can stay home. And I would imagine in your profession that you oftentimes are put in that position of what are the options for our aging adult population. It kills me to know that we've been in this business for 22 years and people still don't realize that this is an option. Mm-hmm. And it's definitely a lesser costly option and probably the best option, assuming that person can be able to stay at home for the person that needs the care.
Right.
Do you find yourself in that position where they're looking for you to steer them, give them advice on where they should place their mom or dad or the loved one that they're looking at?
I see it on both ends. When somebody comes to me to do planning, one of their goals may be to stay at home as long as possible. And so we're going to go ahead and we're going to put that as best we can into their documents. And obviously we can't control what's going to happen, but if your goal is to stay at home, then it's important that your documents reflect that, that it's clear that while you understand it is very expensive, that's your primary consideration, not maybe how much you're going to pass on as an inheritance, which everybody has very, very different goals. But if that is a priority to you, then you focus on that. And so you do clearly indicate, and most importantly, you have those conversations with the people you've nominated to say, this is what I want and this is the conversation we're going to have. And then when it comes time to finding care, it's important to get professionals who know what they're doing, who have trusted people working with them and who are in the community to sit down and make sure, so long as it's safe, how can we make it safe? Let's have this happen where they can stay at home, because financially and medically, if that's what they want, then we need to figure out a way to make that happen. And so it's companies like yours that really cover gaps. If a child is providing care, they need a break. They're going to burn out.
Right.
It's getting professionals into the home and making sure that that's safe and can happen for a long time.
And that's pretty much the premise of our company. We created our company to provide respite for families because we knew firsthand, having cared for our own mother. But at the same time, I look at our caregivers, the caregivers that we employ. They're not contractors. They're surrogate sons and daughters to the people we care for. Emily, it's hard to believe we're done.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Well, it's great having you here. And if you want to reach Emily, you can reach Emily Taylor at 480-699-3145 or go to emilytaylorlaw.com. I'm going to say so long. Go Cardinals. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.
There's no place like home. You've been listening to Bob Roth's Health Futures. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call Cypress Home Care Solutions at 602-264-8009. That's 602-264-8009. Or visit cypresshomecare.com. Be sure to join Health Futures with Bob Roth every Friday at noon, right here on Money Radio 1510 and 99.3 FM.
Are you retired or headed into retirement? Call Anil Vazirani and Secured Financial Solutions at 800-957-5604 extension 200 to learn how to maximize your Social Security and Medicare benefits and to potentially reduce taxes on your Social Security income. Call Secured Financial Solutions at 800-957-5604 extension 200 or on the web at www.theripa.com. Listen to Anil Vazirani on the Money Radio Show every Thursday at 9 a.m.
Money Radio 1510
and 99.3 FM.
Is KFNN Mesa Phoenix and K257CD Phoenix. If you made those New Year's resolutions, we hope that one of them is to continue following the expert advice you get from all of the on-air specialists here at Money Radio. Right now, the Dow is up 188 points, the S&P 500 up by 35, and the NASDAQ is up 106.
When people want to talk about money, this is the place they come to. And there's more on the way after this break for the latest news. And we begin now.